Do you have fully vacant units on your property that you have mothballed until next semester? If you do, I bet you've thought to yourself, we should list those on Airbnb for game day weekends or for parents visiting their kids. Maybe you're in a college town like Austin or Raleigh or Tallahassee, and your city has large festivals and not enough hotel rooms. You know you could lease those units on a nightly or a weekly basis. Providing short-term rentals on platforms like Airbnb can provide a great source of ancillary income. But it takes it takes a lot of organization. There's the additional setup of providing linens and coffee makers and all the little things that a short-term tenant will expect. Then there's the regulatory and tax issues that could require additional work. More importantly, there's the time and labor to market on all the multiple platforms, handle the reservations and cancellations, the cleaning, and then there's the bookkeeping. All of this turns into a big distraction from the main job at hand, which is operating and leasing your property. That's where Vector Travel comes in. These guys know the short-term rental industry and they know how to relieve all of those burdens from the property manager. And best of all, they've become experts in how to do that with student properties. They understand the complexity of mixing travelers with college students. They know it so well, they can quickly identify if a student property is not going to be a good fit for their program. So if you have vacant units, reach out to Vector Travel and have them do a free, no obligation assessment to determine if enrolling your vacant units in their program will be beneficial. Go to vectorstays.com/SHI. Fill out a quick form to receive more information. You will also get the first month's service fee waived by going to that specific landing page. Again, that's vectorstays.com/SHI. Name, image, and likeness, also known as NIL. What is it? Well, it's allowing student athletes to now get paid for being influencers, essentially. So what does that mean for student housing? We're going to talk about that today. Welcome to the Student Housing Insight Podcast, where we are putting you in touch with the people who bring student housing to life. I'm your host, Wesley Dees, and I'm joined today by my wonderful co-host, Greta Dare.
Hi, wonderful. I love that. Hello.
So, Greta, the last time we spoke, you were getting over COVID, version Omicron or Omicron.
Version 3.0.
How are you doing? How are you feeling?
Doing a lot better. It's taken forever to recover, but definitely on the upswing of it for sure. Thank you.
Well, you sound much better, so at least you got that going for you.
Yes.
So Greta and I are also joined today by a special co-host, Chase Minnifield from Easy Turn. Chase, how are you doing?
I'm doing well. Thanks you guys for having me.
So for those of you who don't know Chase or Easy Turn, I'll let him tell you a little bit more about Easy Turn, but he has simplified a lot of people's life in student housing by what him and his co-founder, Lincoln Ogata, have done with Easy Turn. Of course, Lincoln is co-host for Student Housing Insight podcast as well, but today we get to talk to Chase. So welcome.
You get me today. I know everybody loves Lincoln. You get me today though. So no, thank you, Wes. I appreciate it. You know, first of all, thank you in general for you've been very instrumental in our progress with Easy Turn from the very beginning. You're one of our first introductions in the student housing space. So we thank you for all you've helped us with through the journey. So and I'm excited to be on here.
Yeah, well, it's been fun watching you guys, just move and shake things and get people thinking a little bit differently when it comes to how they handle and organize Turn and now a lot of things beyond Turn. But the main reason, that we wanted you on here today is you've got a little bit of a background as a student athlete yourself.
Yep.
You played football at UVA in Charlottesville and then was drafted by the Washington Redskins, or I should say the Washington football team. I think they're going to be making a pretty big announcement here soon what that new name is going to be. You've also been, you've started a couple of companies since leaving the NFL. I would love for you to kind of talk about that as you talk about your journey, but also Forbes 2019 30 under 30. So,
Woohoo!
Yeah, that's been a very interesting situation. The Forbes community has been a community that is littered with young people that are doing cool things, right? So the best thing about it has not been the recognition. Best thing about it has been the networking. And it's been great to just be in that community and learn from everybody.
at least you got it in 2019 when there was still a lot of networking going on.
Right. Exactly.
I feel like for the folks that got named in 2020 and 2021, they kind of got gypped a little bit.
Yeah, they're trying to figure it out. And Lincoln, he always gives me a hard time because I got in at 29 years old. And he was over that hump. So, I took that credit.
There you go. Well, so let's talk really quick about just jump into the NIL discussion. I mean, other than being jealous, this legislation wasn't in place when you were coming through. What's your opinion as a former student athlete? Do you think it's good? Do you think it's bad? Yeah, give us your insight from that perspective.
So I see it in a couple different ways because my journey at the University of Virginia was an interesting journey. I think that, my last 2 years, I was an All-American. I had a little name recognition on campus. But my first 2 years, I was very unknown. Right? I'm walking around campus and you're just a guy with the sports gear on, right? Yeah. Type of situation. So for NIL, obviously my last 2 years, I wish I would have had it in that type of situation because I think I could have capitalized on a lot of opportunities. Especially when Charlottesville in a college town, it's a college space, right? Yeah. And my first 2 years, I'll probably be a little jealous of everybody that was capitalizing on it because I played with the likes of like Chris Long and some of those big name guys that would have, cashed out big time on NIL concepts. So in that space, you probably, it works two different ways, and I think that's where the conversation is a little murky for me. I think it's great for student athletes because yes, there is a need for some type of financial situation for the athletes. I've always been an advocate of that, but it seems like the gates have been open for anything to be fair game, is what I say. And I think before we got on here, I was just talking about, like, I watched we're based in Lexington, Kentucky. So we have a lot of University of Kentucky news, and a couple of the basketball players and stuff like that have signed some large NIL partnerships. But you don't see so much from like the football side. And things of that nature. And that's where it kind of gets weird for me in the conversation is like the fact of fairness when you're talking about like rowers or these type of people and things of that nature, where they might not have as much pull from like visibility standpoint or name standpoint, but they are still your peers and your colleagues, and you still are eating at the same dining room type situation. And what kid's pulling up in his dad's hand-me-down car that he just got, and other kids pulling up in a Porsche that he got from a Porsche NIL deal. You know what I'm saying? So those type of things are just very weird in dealing with the community of the athletes that are on campus. So that's kind of one of the things that I see. So I am jealous because I do wish I didn't have that concept, but I think they just got a lot of buttoning up to do on the full perspective of this concept, I think.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. That's such a valid point though, because there's going to be so many different students that are in different situations, but they're also still all students who are trying to juggle being an athlete while also going to school. And so they all are facing those exact same situations while some are kind of getting different benefits than others. So I feel like that's such a valid point.
Yeah, and let's talk about how this comes back to student housing. This legislation from the NCAA went into effect on July 1st of this past year, and across a lot of the circles that I'm a part of and listen to, there was a lot of buzz about now we can, because it's always been a feather in our cap to have some type of relationship with for any property manager to have some type of relationship with specifically a team and a coach that will place their players at their property and kind of say, hey, this is as a team, this is where we're going to live, either because of some type of convenience to to their facilities that they use, or if it's just something that they know that the manager is going to take care of them and look out for them. And those are always great relationships to have. But now it's a situation, and we've always in the past have had to be very careful with those type of relationships because we don't want to get the coaches or the players in any kind of trouble. And so, discounts that were being offered, had to be offered to everybody, every team and every, other kind of group on campus. And so, but now this kind of puts us in a situation that, if they're able to kind of work in that influencer space where, we can have them promote the property, be it on their social media or some other type of advertising, we can now pay them for that. We can discount their rent for that. And I think I think a lot of people really got excited about it. Greta, I know you want to talk about this a little bit, but coming from talking to people, both from this, we're going to share an audio today from a webinar that we did in late October with some folks that are really close to this. Darren Heitner with Heitner Legal. He is the foremost NIL attorney out there, and was specifically helping Governor DeSantis with passing or writing the NIL legislation for Florida. And so that was a great opportunity that we had him on to speak at this webinar, as well as a couple of folks that are on the other side of it, representing the players and matchmaking them with companies and folks who want to use them from an NIL perspective. And so we'll get into that interview in just a minute. But from that webinar, as well as a lot of folks that we spoke to at LeaseCon, no one's really executing on it. There's still a lot of fear, it seems like, that folks don't want to they don't want to push the button on it. They're excited about it, but they don't, they've just got a lot of questions. And so that's one reason we wanted to take this audio from this webinar and put it into podcast form so folks have a chance to listen to that. And then also just, like we said, wanted to get the perspective from Chase and kind of how he would have thought about this as a student athlete. So Greta, going back to that point, I mean, what is it that you're hearing from folks? Are they still excited about it, or is this something that they still have more questions than answers on right now?
Yes. And it was interesting to me because at LeaseCon, especially, obviously, because there were so many people that were in the major leasing and marketing roles that they did not know exactly how to navigate getting into this. And I know that there are some people who have navigated it, but there were a lot of people who just didn't know where to start. And so, yes, I am really glad that we're releasing this as a podcast because, it has that broader range of audience and is going to give a lot of the tools available to everyone, a lot of the platforms available to everyone. And so, I think that that's wonderful. But I'm also glad, Chase, that you brought that up about, the different types of teams and different types of athletes that aren't necessarily going to be getting those really huge contracts. And instead they're going to get a Porsche, or they're going to get this, or they're going to get that. Because from our perspective in our industry, if, for anyone in our industry that listens to this and hears about the different ways that they can gain access to these athletes, Wes, like you were just saying, right? It always was a really great thing if we could access an entire team or a number of teammates. That's wonderful for us as an industry or as a property manager, because it means that if you can bring a number of students in, you've now increased your pre-leasing, right? And that's fantastic. Now we have an added layer of that. Now it's okay if we get the whole rowing team, for instance, Chase, right? So you get the whole rowing team. Well, that also means now you have all of those people who can now post that to their social media. And so now you're getting additional advertising, and that's fantastic as well. So you've increased your pre-leasing. You are assisting a whole area of the athletic department that potentially is not going to be getting these huge contracts, but you're still increasing awareness for your property while taking care of the pre-leasing as well. So there are huge opportunities, because I think another problem is that a lot of our property management companies are like, oh, well, all of the big important athletes, like they're getting all of these huge contract deals. It's like, yeah, but you don't necessarily need the huge athlete. Your job is to fill spaces, and you can do that. If we're talking about UK, then yeah, you can can do that with the other athletic department. The goal is to fill the beds, heads in beds, guys, heads in beds. That's what we're after here. And if you have 30 people or you have 15 teammates that are all going to be out there on Instagram or on whatever it is, and they're going to be talking about you, and that's in your contract, and you're giving a housing discount, that's the goal, and you are accomplishing it now. So listening to this, hearing the different ways that you can gain access or reaching out to the university, however it is that you go about this, you now have access to be able to fill your communities. And right now, I'm just throwing it out there because when this does get released, now is the time that we're going to need to be doing it, because I know that a lot of people who, as we go into the second semester, are going to need to be hitting the ground running with pre-leasing. This is going to be your key to be able to increase those numbers. So if you haven't done it yet, if you haven't been taking advantage of this NIL or NIL, now is the time to access any of those athletes that have not been accessed yet. Go after them.
Yeah. So Chase, let me ask you, I mean, going back to, when you were living in Charlottesville, and we've had a couple of discussions, about where you chose to live and why you chose to live there and that type of thing. But thinking about having that opportunity available now and kind of considering all things equal, as far as, not necessarily who's giving you the best deal, what community would be giving you the best discount or whatever. Let's just assume that everybody's kind of offering the same thing, right? What would be some of the other things, as a student athlete that you're thinking about that's going to be key for you making that decision?
Obviously, proximity to the athletics facilities is a huge thing. That's where we spend most of our time at. Most people usually come in right at the bell for meetings and and workouts and things of that nature. So the quicker they can get there, the better type situation. But I do want to make a point that, my largest expense when I was in school was my rent. So that was the number one thing that we're trying to clear on a monthly basis. Everything else is pretty much taken care of for athletes in general, as far as eating, books, study, where to study, things of that nature. But if you're living off campus, then your rent is your biggest thing that you're trying to cover type situation. So I think there's a huge opportunity in the space in general to try to help out or to try to get people in those spaces and to put heads in beds, as Greta said. But yeah, proximity is probably the number one thing that I would say right out the gate, just because, from an athlete's schedule, they're going to spend, besides the weekends, but let's look at Monday through Friday. Monday through Friday, they're just they're going to sleep in the room. That's pretty much it. From morning through the end of the day, your schedule is packed with what's supposed to be with classes and study halls, lunches, food, mandatory food, workout, all those different types of things like that. So there was times at UVA when I was there that I was waiting for the bus at 9:00 and I left at 8 a.m. From my dorm type situation. So, it's not much time being spent, especially in the season, in your actual season, in the actual units and things of that nature. So the ability for you to get there and get back and forth from where you're supposed to be, or to get to campus easily, get to your classes easy. Proximity becomes a big factor, I would say.
Yeah, and I want to break that down for everybody just to think about. You may be at a property that isn't the closest, to the athletic facilities, but maybe you provide a shuttle service. Are there things, if you're trying to go after a specific team or a group of athletes, it's probably worth sitting down with the bus driver or the transportation company that you contract with to say, hey, we want to make sure that we're getting all students to where they need to go. But, is there a way that we can, modify the schedule so that we make sure that these guys know that they're going to be, guys and gals, that they're going to be dropped off at this particular location at this particular time, and it's going to run like clockwork, to maybe give that a little bit more priority. Greta, any other kind of suggestions like that when it comes to those properties that may not be right beside of the baseball field or right beside of the football field?
No, I do want to kind of touch on what you just said about the shuttle, though, because I think that a lot of people that hear that they look at that as an obstacle. And I want to reiterate, for a lot of people, shuttle transportation, that doesn't mean you have to run out and buy a shuttle. There's a lot of ways to get around that. There's ways that you can sign contracts with shuttle services, and those, I mean, you're looking at maybe $15,000 over a year. And if you're able to sign an entire team or 30 people, and you're talking about all of those spaces to be filled, that is a worthy investment into your property. And typically speaking, you just have to change your insurance at your property. But other than that, that means that that's going to come with a driver dedicated to your actual site, and they're going to take care of the licensing and all of that stuff. So just because of the fact that, you did just say that, Wes, I do want to point that out to anyone that's listening, and you may not know where to begin. There are a lot of shuttle and transportation services where they can provide either an actual shuttle or a van, and that is a service that you can add to your property without having to go out and purchase and wrap and go through that whole entire process at your community. For anyone that doesn't know that that is an option, it absolutely is. And you would just have to do that cost comparison to the number of leases that you're signing to the cost of the actual contract that you would be signing as well.
Yeah. And those contracts aren't cheap. I mean, it's just to do something during the academic year, 10 months out of the year, you're looking at a lot of the expenses I've seen, are typically anywhere between 90 to 120,000 a year. And that's just one shuttle. And that doesn't even include, the fuel and other things. So that's just, cost of having a driver and a vehicle and insurance. That's not even including maintenance. So, so obviously all that has to be considered. But yeah, I mean, my main thing is, talk to your student athletes, that you're considering on doing this, and really just sitting down and finding out, what it is that, that you can provide for them that is going to make life a little bit easier, make that decision a little bit easier, because I think, what we're able to offer from an NIL perspective is going to be really based on two things. One, how far that student athlete's reach is, and let's face it, someone, a blue chip athlete may certainly take on, call it a 30% housing discount, just because that's what the rest of his teammates are getting. And that's just kind of a blanket offer, right? But that doesn't necessarily mean that he or she's going to be able to give you all the things that you're looking for, when it comes to posting or, attending events, those kind of things. They just may not be able to do those for that same discount. Doesn't mean that you don't offer that blue chip athlete that type of a discount. You just got to understand that they may not be able to do all the things that you would like them to do or requiring of the other ones. But yeah, just I think having conversations, and don't be afraid of going to the coaches and talking through it as well. But I do want to be very clear. There is some very gray lines when it comes to working with coaches, working with any faculty or staff from the university, and putting together a deal, because if they will be in violation if it's a situation where they are bringing or brokering any type of NIL deal to the players. So, and that's another reason I really suggest using some of these third-party companies that broker those deals, because it's you just, like I said, you want to have a good relationship with the coaches, but this is a situation where you want to make sure that you're certainly not paying them to make those introductions or for anything that's signed with an athlete, because that will get them in trouble for sure. Well, guys, I want to make sure that we've got enough time for everybody to listen to this webinar that we had. So I'm going to go ahead and cut to that. And then when we come back in the outro, Chase, I want to talk with you really quick about what's going on at Easy Turn and some of the things you guys are doing there.
Sounds good.
All right. Enjoy this, guys. So to begin with, we'll start with Darren Heitner. Darren is the founder of Heitner Legal. He's been very instrumental, an instrumental part in helping the state of Florida and their legislature draft their NIL legislation, which was the first state to pass an NIL bill. Darren, tell us a bit more about what you and your firm are doing in the NIL space.
Sure. First of all, thanks so much for having me. What my firm is doing currently and what we've been doing for the past 4 months is largely assisting both athletes and brands with the transactional affairs surrounding NIL, name, image, and likeness. And so on the athlete side, I'm not very focused on procuring the opportunities, but with one specific individual, that being Anthony Richardson, the quarterback at University of Florida. Mainly what we're doing is after the deals have been brought in, either by the athletes or their respective agents, we are looking over those contracts and largely negotiating them and making sure that the athletes are very protected. Everything from looking at the term, the compensation, the intellectual property rights, et cetera. We're also working with athletes who now, for the very first time, have the capacity to earn money and protect them by creating corporate structures surrounding them and loaning out the athlete's services so they're not necessarily contracting on their individual capacity. We're also helping with protecting their intellectual property, filing trademark applications, ensuring that content, including copyrights, have been properly cleared so that they're not creating unnecessary exposure for themselves. And then outside of working with the athletes, we're also working with many brands and advising and consulting them on best practices, what their contracts should be looking like when they are providing them to the athletes or the agents, helping them best understand the various laws that have been passed in over 25 states and how they vary state by state, as well as the NCAA's interim NIL policy, and then finally the respective school NIL policy. So there's a lot to get through. Whether you're on the brand or the athlete side, it helps having someone or a firm that has been working in it for the first 4 months. And I've been working in this space even prior to July 1, 2021.
Well, fantastic. So next up is Jason Bergman. He is the co-founder and CEO of MarketPryce, which is a technology platform making direct connections between brands and athletes. Jason, tell us a bit more about what MarketPryce is doing in the NIL space. All right, so we've still got some more technology things going on. You may have to just log out and log back in. Let's go ahead and move to Mike. Mike, is your audio working?
I hope so. I turned it on.
Perfect.
Yeah.
So really quick about Mike, he's the one guy on our, I think we probably all have several jobs, but he officially has 2 jobs. Mike Blewitt is the Senior Vice President of Property Acquisition and Media at College Sports Management Group, also known as CSMG. He is also an on-air host for Sports Grid. He's probably going to be the sexiest voice you're going to hear today. So, Mike,
second place. Greta's got me beat. Come on, Wes.
So, Mike, tell us a little bit about how CSMG is intersecting with name, image, and likeness.
Sure. So, Collegiate Sports Management Group has been around for 6 years, and they made their way, and we have made our way in the college space by interacting with conferences and schools of all different divisions, 1, 2, and 3, junior colleges as well, in a variety of different business initiatives, media rights negotiation, sponsorship sales, esports, and as it's been evolving over the last couple of years, name, image, and likeness. And we have really 2 tracks that we're following right now. And I think it's important for everybody to know that even though NIL came into the public for in July and probably a little bit before that, it's continuing to evolve. I don't think myself nor Darren nor Jason would explain that we've got it all figured out and we know exactly what the long tail of this is going to look like. It continues to evolve. But Collegiate CSMG has really 2 pipelines. One is that we are working with schools and conferences on a regular basis and showing them a specific platform that they can use to manage NIL activity. That platform is called Open Doors. There are a number of other NIL platforms out there, but Open Doors has been around for over a decade and had made it had made this platform an easy to use platform for athletes, professional athletes and Olympians at the time to be able to find different business deals, endorsement deals, things of that nature. And it is now expanded, obviously, to student athletes. There are 50,000 student athletes registered on Open Doors, which they can do for free and open up commerce for them in a two-way basis. They can go find deals, and certainly brands can potentially find them. So think of it as a software license for the school so that their student athletes can sign up for that platform and then start the potential flow of commerce. And the second way is not dissimilar to what Darren had mentioned before. We are connecting agencies and brands specifically with student athletes. We work on behalf of the brand and or the agency in order to find a way for their message to be conveyed through student athletes. It's to this point, up to July 1st, it wasn't an avenue that they could pursue, but now it is. And we have a video here, Wes. I don't know if you can click on that video and show you a recent endorsement deal that we were able to put together with a gentleman named Cade York. He's the place kicker at LSU. Darren, I know you're a Gator, so forgive me for it being a Tiger, but for the purposes of this, it's to show everybody how the brands can connect with a specific player.
Yeah, let's play that really quick. Hold on just a second. Hopefully this won't give everybody echo issues, but let's go for it.
I'm Cade York, and I just signed the boldest contract in college football, Velveeta's queso contract. When I'm kicking, you can be dipping. Every time I line up from 50 plus, you could score a free queso. Co-sign the queso contract.
So there's a little bit of an echo there, but I think you all got a sense of what that can look like. Cade York was able to put together these commercials for Velveeta. It got tons of traction, millions of views. Of that specific video you saw is directly from Velveeta's Twitter feed, and that has 2.5 million views, not to mention the ones on his personal social media accounts, plus LSU football picked it up, and it gained a lot of traction in the millions and millions of views for that simple Velveeta commercial. So that's one way in which we're connecting student athletes with brands.
Yeah. And not, he wasn't the quarterback. He wasn't,
That's right.
And that's fantastic. I love it. I think we've got Jason back. Jason, are you there?
I think so. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Oh, nice. Let's have some fun now. Awesome. Well, I hope I didn't miss anything too fun, but yeah, thank you for having me. And I was going to say, Wes, very cool. You had us kind of like backstage behind the curtain. I thought that was awesome. And then it slowly reveals ourselves to talk NIL. So epic. We're stealing that for our own webinars moving forward, and going to take credit for it, but I'll give you some. But to give some intro on myself, I'm the CEO and co-founder of a company called MarketPryce. So I know Mike was mentioning Open Doors a little bit, and Darren's working on these deals as well, which is awesome. My background has always been in sports marketing, so I started my career working with businesses as big as Anheuser-Busch and DraftKings and CBS Sports and Vitamin Shop, helping them work with athletes, all the way to like local car dealerships and everything in between. And I saw the need for a two-sided marketplace, more so than an Open Doors one-sided. And we could get into, how exactly we work, if that's helpful. But I saw the need for a company like MarketPryce, and I wanted to sort of test it out to see if this is something that athletes or agents wouldn't need. I know we're on video, so you guys can't see how tall I am. I'm not an athlete. I'm like 5'7". I wish I could just snap my fingers and try to be a pro athlete or student athlete. I can't. So I started my own sports marketing agency, actually, where I reached out to a couple thousand professional athletes. And I was like, look, I'd love to be able to bring you marketing deals. I'm a huge sports nerd. So as the guys at the end of the roster that I knew like the back of my hand, because I'm watching them every single day on Sunday and watching them play in the NBA. And over the course of a couple of years, I represented 12 NFL and NBA athletes, helping them find marketing deals. And I saw how hard it was to consistently go from 0 to 1. And I compare it a lot to like a dating app, where it's really hard to find someone to go on a date with. That's why dating apps are multiple billion-dollar businesses, because you log onto an app and you swipe right or left on someone who has also signed up to this app because they want to match with you. So with student athletes, that is a huge opportunity, right? And Greta said it really well, give the power to these student athletes where you can take marketing into your own hands. So our business, we launched in January, so 6 months before July. And, since our launch in January, we've raised over just about $3.5 million. We've grown our team to 13 employees, and we've seen over 3,000 matches created between athletes and brands, between over 1,600 athletes and 400 companies. And in just 10 months, we are already in the #1 marketplace in terms of like active opportunities for student athletes, which is really exciting. And, I feel like we're still just getting started. So yeah, that's a quick background on me. It would suck if I was on mute the whole time. I feel like you would have interrupted me like a minute in. So I hope you guys heard all that.
Yeah, no, thanks. And let's talk a little bit about, I guess the first question I want to really ask you guys is how is this new policy from the NCAA, as well as the related, legislation from the states, how is that disrupting college athletics? And Jason, I think we'll start with you on that.
Sure. I could start with the fun side of the opportunity, and I'm sure Darren can come in with the hard-hitting legal analysis of why it's a mess right now. But I think the coolest thing of how it's affecting college sports and just college life in general from our perspective is, we're talking to companies every day, but we're talking to student athletes every day. And, we've seen a lot of student athletes just know NIL, but not know anything else really about it. And it's like a totally open landscape, right? It's like a whiteboard of these athletes really need education. And, they're in school getting education for classes, but with NIL, it's, we see it as a big opportunity to teach athletes like, hey, well, now you're starting a little bit earlier on building your brand, on accessing these opportunities, whether it's partnering with companies like yourself at SHI, getting housing, but also working with protein bar companies, working with mac and cheese companies that I love Velveeta. I had that all the time in college. Now he probably gets free Velveeta for life. That's awesome. So it's really giving the opportunity to college athletes. The only thing that I didn't love is how fast it happened, where the student athletes in school now, it's just like, it's like a startup, right? They didn't even have any time to prep for it really. So I think, in a year from now, and 2 years from now, and 10 years from now, when NIL is not as new and sexy and it's more just commonplace, student athletes are going to be a lot better, accustomed to handle this. And again, that's why I think companies like MarketPryce, like Open Doors, is doing an amazing job as well, educating student athletes, being a resource for student athletes to help. But yeah, I did think it came a little fast, even though we've been talking about it forever. But yeah, that's just my take. I see of course, a huge opportunity, and I'm sure I'm not alone with that.
Mike, before we move to Darren on that question, I mean, you're primarily working with the colleges, and and from that standpoint, how are they seeing this? Both from a recruiting standpoint, and then also from selling their own advertising. Are companies pulling out of advertising on stadiums and on fields, in order to pay the athletes directly?
Sure. I would say that it's important to note that I think all of us understand that as much as we are all bullish on the movement towards NIL being legal for college athletes to be able to monetize their name, image, and likeness, all of us on this call are bullish about it. We understand, I think, sort of the tricky spot that the colleges are in. There are, as Darren can speak to more eloquently than I could, there are a wide-ranging number of legal issues that have yet to be worked out. It's a lot of nebulous situations regarding the legality, the disclosure of certain NIL deals, and for the schools to have to get on top of that in whatever respective state they happen to be in can be difficult. But many of the athletic departments across the country are made up of former student athletes, so they are supportive of it overall. And from a recruiting standpoint, if you aren't on board, it'll be quickly snuffed out that you're a program that's perhaps not supportive of this initiative. And I think everybody, even if they didn't believe it, which I think almost all of them do, they would have to publicly support it, because you would find yourself falling behind in recruiting and being not supportive of student athletes. So that's part one. Part two, as far as the advertising is concerned, I think we definitely need more data to be able to figure out exactly if there's any percentage that's saying being cannibalized from what a brand was giving to a school and diverting part of that towards the student athletes specifically. But I can tell you that's definitely a concern for certain athletic departments. I don't know that it's happened yet. I don't know that it will happen. We're also coming off a situation where for the last year and a half, we didn't have fans in a lot of instances, or they were limited. So we're coming into NIL off of COVID restrictions, and schools to some extent are still getting their legs under them as far as full capacity stadiums and arenas. But it's definitely a concern. I think it remains to be seen whether that will cannibalize at all. But it is possible that the rising tide lifts all boats, and brands find it even more attractive to activate in the collegiate marketplace, because now they can attack it from two angles. They can put signage in the stadium. They can tie that same signage to specific student athletes and promote that brand. So I think from that standpoint, it remains to be seen, but I don't think it's an overall negative for the schools.
Yeah. I hope you're right about that. I think there's something to be. I think with student athletes is using them as an influencer. I think there's going to be something immediately that folks are going to look at from a long-term standpoint. Though, we'll say, how about if you pick the athlete to promote your property that ends up doing something that just doesn't work out right, and it ends up being a bad image for your property. I think that's something that a lot of people are interested in. Would love to. I should have made that a poll question, but would love to hear back in the chat.
Think about it, because, Wes, you could have an athlete that will be very well known. Just take a basketball player, for instance, that has gone the route of going to school X and will be there for his one season before he's a lottery pick. It's entirely possible that you can activate a brand endorsement through that athlete. But if you have a pre-existing relationship with the school, that school is going to be there for the rest of your lifetime, and that athlete may have moved in and off campus in a matter of 6 or 9 months. So that's important to know for brand equity and long-term sustainability of activating with a school. Yeah. Spending your dollars on the athlete, I feel like that's a higher risk, versus spending it with, on signage at the stadium or whatever. Because that relationship, that the university's not going anywhere. I mean, we've seen some universities and some athletic departments go through some pretty crazy crap, right? And and a lot of scandals and that type of thing, but they're not going anywhere. And so, I would just kind of mention that to the folks that are out there trying to figure out what to do with those budgeting dollars. That's something you've got to think about. But hey, let's get over to Darren, because Darren, you've been at the forefront of this with with the legislation in Florida. Like I said earlier, Florida was the first one to come out the gate with a bill that was passed. Overall, the burden that's left on state legislatures and the colleges to figure out compliance. It seems like I'm hearing a lot of things that the universities, the states, and the NCAA are all just kind of pointing their fingers at each other. Can you expand on that a little bit?
Well, first, I'd love to take credit as the first state to pass NIL legislation. It was actually California back in 2019.
Oh, gotcha.
But we were in Florida the very first state to have a July 1, 2021 effective date. California's was 2023. And so we really did push the envelope on that front. With regard to your question about pointing fingers, no one's pointing fingers. What happened was in March of 2020, the state of Florida passed its legislation. It was signed into law by Governor Ron DeSantis in June of 2020. And so that gave the NCAA roughly a year to figure out what it was going to do, if anything at all. And it went through various proposals. In the meantime, in that gap of a year, many other states decided we're going to use either Florida's, California's, any other state as a template for our own NIL laws. And what ended up happening is you'd have divergence. A state like Texas, for instance, decided that it wanted to specifically exclude certain types of products like tobacco, marijuana, gambling, etc. Whereas we're silent in the state of Florida, and imagine in states that don't have any NIL laws whatsoever. So June 30th comes about of this year, one day prior to July 1, the day that we're going live in Florida and many other states are going live. And the NCAA says, with less than 12 hours to spare, we're going to provide our temporary interim NIL policy, which 4 months later I guess you can shed the interim designation because it remains the same. And what did the NCAA basically say? Well, the guardrails are very slim. There must be quid pro quo. So you can't just drop a bag of cash for an athlete. The athlete has to provide some sort of deliverable. The compensation can't be contingent on the athlete going to a university or staying at that university. In fact, I just negotiated a contract where the brand tried to make it so that it would only be effective if the athlete stayed at that university, and we negotiated that out. And then third, there can't be compensation based on on-field, on-court performance. So there can't be these types of performance-based bonuses. That's pretty much it from the NCAA's perspective. And then the NCAA said to the athletes, after that, you have to look at your respective state NIL laws, if they exist. And to the extent that there are not NIL laws within your state, you have to look at your respective school NIL policies. In 4 months, the NCAA has been completely hands-off. I think there was one instance, and I think it was with Lululemon, where the NCAA kind of imposed its will and said there had to be some quid pro quo because it didn't seem to exist in a deal that Lululemon was offering. Otherwise, the NCAA has been completely silent. The various states have been very silent from a regulatory standpoint too. While they've created their respective statutes to the extent that they have, there doesn't seem to be much of an enforcement mechanism, or at least anyone within those states that wishes or seeks to enforce those regulations thus far. I'm not sure of many violations, but to the extent that there are any, we haven't heard of any threats or litigation on that front. And then the schools are basically just looking at their respective state laws, if there are any, looking at their own policies, looking at the NCAA's policy. And in most circumstances, they're not even acting as a clearinghouse. They're just documenting the deals that are being done in case there's an issue. The biggest one being, well, there's two. One, brands and athletes can't use the marks of the universities, the names, the logos of the universities without having consent. And even in a state like South Carolina, its law says the schools can't even provide that consent. So that's number one. The other issue is when there's a potential conflict between the terms of an athlete deal with a brand and the terms of a deal between the university and a separate brand. So if an athlete does a deal with a shoe and apparel brand, and that brand wants that athlete to wear that brand's shoes on the court, but yet the school has a deal in place with a separate brand that requires the athlete wear the competing brand shoes, that can't exist. The athlete will have to wear the shoes of the brand that the school is engaged with. That's really what the schools are looking out for. And again, we have not, at least publicly, seen any conflicts thus far.
Gotcha. So let's bring this back to housing for a minute. So one thing I'm hearing you say is, if the punter lives with me at my property and he misses I said the punter, but the field goal kicker, he misses the field goal, I can't kick him out the next week is what you're telling me, huh?
That's right. The deals are guaranteed in that sense. I mean, and to be honest, like no professional athlete would ever negotiate a deal that allows a brand to do that anyway. Athletes are going to want guarantees in place, and so no. The answer is that the deals cannot be contingent on the success or failure of the athlete. But I wanted to also address something you mentioned earlier, because a lot of people try to say, oh, this isn't a great deal for brands because, of the guaranteed type of element. But you talked about what if an athlete does something that denigrates the reputation of the brand? Well, there's something called the morals clause that can easily be negotiated in these contracts, which are commonly negotiated in professional athlete contracts. If an athlete does something, let's say an athlete is convicted of a crime, or is even accused of a crime, or does something that goes against the morals of the brand. And these are negotiated terms. You can include that. You can include that type of clause within an agreement and get out of the agreement as the brand. And that is irrespective of whether the athlete is still on the team or at the university.
So let's talk a little bit about the compliance and contracts while we're there. And Jason, I think this, if I'm looking at athletes at my school and I'm using MarketPryce, and we go through that, if it's either some type of, either free housing or it's direct cash or whatever, how's using groups like yourself, where you've got a technology platform that's making that connection, is the contract like, do you guys provide that? Is that something that the housing providers need to go to someone like Darren for? Explain that a little bit to me.
Yeah, I think it's case by case too. And I also want to throw out a plug to Darren Heightner on Twitter, who's a beast, who literally is like the NIL lawyer. There's nothing I enjoy more than Darren just being like, there's more to NIL than just performance on the field. So go check him out if you haven't already. I enjoy seeing those threads. But in terms of compliance, yeah, like there's a question I'm sure we'll talk about a little bit later, Wes, of like, is it better to use a company like a MarketPryce or just kind of go at it yourself? A guy like Darren isn't sitting around doing maybe $100 deals or free product deals in terms of contracts. So unless he is, I would be
based on that view of the beach he's got behind him.
I doubt it. Yeah. And that's the, he mentioned AR-15, Go Gators. He mentioned the Cavender twins, like these bigger deals. Sure, they could be started on a platform like a MarketPryce, but we always recommend if they're like in the six figures or bigger, like, use a professional like Darren. But a lot of the deals on MarketPryce, most of the thousands of deals are free product deals, right? There may be a few $100 or a few $1,000 where it's the not top 1% of athletes. So not the quarterback, but maybe the kicker, all the other kickers in the country that don't have a Velveeta deal, right? Where we have a contract in place where we automatically generate who was in the deal, how much the deal was worth, cash and product, what the athlete needs to do in exchange for it, and then just contact details of who's the person at the brand they're dealing with and our contact details as well. We've seen that, be more than acceptable to these schools when they disclose these deals to their own universities. And that's something where even Darren mentioned it, right? Of like who's coming down on these athletes. We want to make sure that it's never the athlete's fault, right? Like we're giving them everything that they need in terms of what's included in these deals. But to answer your question, like specifically, I'd say a guy like Darren is too good at what he does to do a contract for like a $250 deal. MarketPryce has that contract where there's not going to be things like morals clauses because it's a one-off post, right? They may not renew those deals and make them year-long deals where there's going to be more terms, but we have a really standard thing going. And again, that's pretty standard across the other marketplaces like an Open Doors and Icon Source and the other players out there.
Yeah.
So for that, sorry, I'm totally going to cut in because this is one of the things that I was actually wondering about, and it kind of builds off of that same thing, is for the housing communities, because obviously I feel like for a lot of this that we're going to be looking at engaging with students for obviously discounted housing or free housing in exchange for things, right? And so I feel like these types of platforms are kind of the ideal place to put it on there because that's ideally what you're looking at. But I feel like you're also going to require a morality clause to a certain extent because you do have to protect the brand and it does need to have those additional values built in. Is it going to match the community? If somebody's going to be posting on your behalf or doing virtual, anything like that, any videos or something like that. So having that post go on something like MarketPryce to at least get that relationship started with those different types of players that aren't the star quarterback or something like that. And then have an additional agreement afterwards that potentially you work out. Is that something that our directors of marketing, that's something that they could do as well between two legal teams?
Absolutely. Yeah. I was just talking to a company. Their name is called Kelp NFT. I spoke with them probably like an hour ago, and they help athletes design their own NFTs where there are a lot more intricacies to those contracts where they start the conversation on MarketPryce and then they can take the conversation off afterwards. That's why I like to compare us a lot to those dating apps where you go on your first date on Tinder. If you're messaging someone back on Tinder or Hinge after 5 or 6 dates and not just texting them, there's probably something funky going on, right? Like that's something where the 0 to 1 is the hardest part. And excuse me for all the dating app analysis. That's what student
athletes. There's a lot going on there.
You keep rolling it back to dating apps, man.
Storytelling is all about starting where people are familiar with, right? So two-sided marketplace, closing endorsement, like that's something that these student athletes are not totally aware of, right? So we want to make it understandable, and it works for us. But yeah, I hope that helps. But then again, like the thing is, a lot of it is can be case by case, right? It's not just churning out these deals. I know one thing that we try to do and focus on, and what we've been great at, is that 0 to 1 of just even for you guys, right? Let's say you do want to work with student athletes. Where do you even start? Like, you may know the market.
I think that's been everybody's biggest
Where do you
question
start?
since this started, is nobody knows where to begin. And so I think this is exactly what it is these types of platforms of the tender of sports relationships. This is where you start. You get posted on this to be able to gain access, and so that the student athlete or athletes can gain access to your communities all nationwide. And then from there, you negotiate the terms directly with that student athlete. So there is the answer to your questions. For anybody that's been wondering, this is where you start. Ta-da.
Yeah, and one
amazing pitch on MarketPryce, by the way. Let's talk after this. That's exactly
Right?
our pitch to these
Where's
companies.
my cut, sir? Where's my cut?
We have job postings up. I'll send it. We'll talk afterwards. I don't want to bore the audience, but absolutely, I love it.
So one other resource with that too that I was speaking with Darren about before we went live is his blog site, sportsagentblog.com, and I think there's some resources that you can find there. Darren, I don't know if there's better directions you can give them on that.
No, it's sportsagentblog.com, and if you click on the menu, there's a drop down, and you'll be able to see the various NIL laws as well as the NIL school policies to the extent that they've been published. And if you're in a state that has an NIL law, you'll be able to pull it up and use that to guide you in terms of what you can and can't do. Again, a lot of those states have very similar NIL laws to the extent that they have any NIL law whatsoever. The NCAA has also published its interim NIL policy. Attached to it is I think a 3-page Q&A, which provides some additional insight as well. Ultimately, any contract, as I mentioned, should be provided by the athlete to the university through whatever platform the compliance department dictates. But yeah, it's important to, if you can, and you have the capacity, utilize a law firm to assist you in navigating this process. You know, if you're providing, I heard earlier, it may be that you're providing discounted or free lodging. You know, we just negotiated a deal for an athlete to have a free car for the remainder of his time at his university. The ink just went dry, and it'll be announced next week. And, you know, there were certain things that we had to clearly focus on, and there were probably 5 rounds of back and forth on the document before we actually met eye to eye on you know, what it should look like, and to make sure that we're not in violation of any law or rules. So it's important. So, and we've got Tiffany Alsop asked, she's with Cardinal Management Group. She asked as well, and it's kind of similar question to what I had earlier. Does working with companies like Open Doors, Yoke, and MarketPryce to book your athletes take the legalities, if any, off of the communities? Are there risks doing a deal directly with an athlete versus an agent? Can you guys talk a little bit about agent? Because I don't think they can actually have an agent, correct? No, they can.
They definitely can.
Okay.
They just need to be registered in their own state where they operate.
Okay. No, they need to be, let me clarify, they need to be licensed in the state in which the athlete is domiciled, which is technically where the athlete is enrolled. Okay.
And Tiffany, I don't know if your question, when you were saying agent, I don't know if you were talking about companies like MarketPryce, or if you were talking about a regular sports agent. That's kind of what went in my mind when I saw that question, but maybe you were talking about MarketPryce.
I mean, Wes, just to answer sort of generally, platforms like MarketPryce and Open Doors and others are going to provide obviously some sort of comfort or safe haven. There's terms and conditions on these platforms that are established. If you can always go to a student athlete directly and potentially negotiate a deal, but then you are working with potentially another third party, somebody like Darren, in order to negotiate it, which would also be perfectly viable. But these platforms have vetted thousands of transactions to this point. So you'll obviously most likely feel more comfortable starting out that way before you potentially make inroads to a student athlete, which, to be honest, if you're somebody that's running a student housing facility, I don't know what your connections are necessarily directly with student athletes. Even somebody like myself, there's generally a buffer between myself and the student athlete specifically. We work with schools and athletic departments and what I do, but I don't have as much access to the student athlete specifically. I would be more likely to use a platform in order to reach out to them, in order to structure the deal, and make it very specific towards them, or to a range of student athletes that fit what you are looking for in the endorsement. It doesn't necessarily have to be 1v1. In these platforms, you can set a range of characteristics that you're looking for, regional, gender, sport specific, and then send that deal out to a certain number, set a limit on it, and you say the first 5 people to accept this deal is who we'll use.
Yeah. And what I like about the tech platforms, be it MarketPryce, Influencer, they're really, for the student, it's keeping, and I say student because that's what they are. It's keeping this organized for them. It's keeping them compliant. And everything is just so much more transparent. I think if certainly you're welcome to go and offer something directly, but, my feeling is you're going to be more apt to get an athlete to say yes if it's going through some type of process that he or she trusts. And so that would be my recommendation. Greta, I don't know if you've got any thoughts on that or not, but.
No, I completely agree. I was racking my brain trying to go through or trying to figure out how I would direct one of my team members to go out and try to get one of these deals on their own. And it's like, one of the standard methods of, if you're a marketing specialist and you're out in the market, it's like, oh, okay, go meet up with the different coaches and, giving information and creating a really great looking flyer or portfolio and dropping off your card and being like, we'd really love to work with some of your student athletes and offer them free housing and exchange. And, but it's like, you're still going through barriers and you're still not meeting up with them directly. Or if you have students that are your CAs or whatever the case may be and trying to make those connections, we're basically doing the same thing that we're trying to do with student influencers when we're trying to find them on our own versus working with a company that already has student influencers. We've already learned this lesson, guys. Sometimes it's easier to just work with the companies that already do this well. And so to me, it makes sense instead of trying to navigate this on our own, to just work with the tech that works, especially with something like this.
Yeah,
and understand it's.
Go ahead, Wes, sorry.
There's a lot of growing pains that are happening this year.
Especially just considering all the legalities around it and the fact that, like everybody's basically talked about right now, there's so much gray area because so many things have not been figured out yet.
Yeah.
So
Wes, one last thing. Jason has had 1,700 athletes already complete deals on his platform.
1,650.
Yeah. And Open Doors has 50,000 student athletes signed up. So these are established platforms. It's the best way to find and connect with these folks right now.
There's too many simple things that you can mess up in these deals, sitting in on thousands of them, right? Like I know even you mentioned Yoke, like Yoke got in a lot of trouble on July 2nd. I'm sure Darren probably remembers this too, where you're capturing the rights of the athletes forever, unlimited use. And it's like, I don't know if they knew what they were doing, that athletes wouldn't like it, or people like Darren would be like, oh my God, how did someone sign this? Like there's just too many things to like paying the athlete, to having the athlete include a paid partnership with the athlete to make sure that it's actually legal on social media, if it's a social media deal, actually paying the athlete, right? The tax implications of it. There's too many simple things that are like, those are the things why I use a marketplace, like a MarketPryce. And then two, to plug MarketPryce quickly, like it's so hard to know which athletes are even interested in your company, in the housing, in the specific location. So on a company like MarketPryce, and this is what separates us from everybody out there, it's like you sign up to our website, it's free for any company. So it's free for any housing company. They create a campaign, it's like a job posting, where you don't even need to know who you're interested in, right? You can just say, hey, here's the states that I operate in, here's the cities I operate in. And then our network of athletes, like they're applying to a job. I'm done with dating app things, right? I moved on to job. It's a little older of an audience. I'm cool with that. They apply to work with you because they need housing. So that's the 0 to 1 part of that's why it's so difficult. And like we had some of my most favorite deals are the most random ones where there's a company that helps athletes with asthma. And it's an asthma device. And it's like, well, where do you even start? Which athletes have asthma? They post one campaign and they've gotten double-digit applications. from all athletes with asthma that play all different types of sports. So it's that initial 0 to 1 that is so hard that you don't even need to know what you're doing on a company like MarketPryce, and you could hit home runs in athlete marketing.
Yeah.
That's why you use a platform like ours.
Let's talk a little bit about strategy, and and let's talk about what athletes make the most sense for a specific engagement. I tend to think that a football player is probably something that works out better for a live event, like a pool party or something, and then maybe your tennis player is probably going to be better at creating Instagram content to promote your property. I may have that completely wrong.
Can I disagree with you? Yeah.
Yeah, I want to just bring that up to you guys, and I know Mike, you kind of put student athletes in 3 to 4 buckets when it comes to NIL.
I'll try to tie a couple of things together, and then Jason, you can jump in after me. And Tiffany has a good question here in the chat, or a follow-up about athletes perhaps coming to them and asking for rates that they can't quite afford. I think these marketplaces, be it MarketPryce, Open Doors, Yoke, or whatever else, it does create a safe haven, not just for the student athletes' legal issues, but for yours as well, in it being able to understand what the rates are, what they have been for like student athletes. And the way I've really sort of described this to people that may not have as much experience in this space is, I think you're looking at 3 specific buckets of folks that you can utilize for your brand. And one is by the sheer force of their superior play on the field, some people are going to be able to garner a lot of commercial value. Trevor Lawrence last year, any Heisman winner, players of the year, people in the Final Four, very popular Olympians successful Olympians are going to, by the sheer force of their play on the field, demand a lot of commercial value nationally, regionally, locally. But bucket number 2 is important as well, because you'll have homegrown athletes, perhaps somebody that has played Nebraska volleyball for 4 or 5 years and has had a connection with the community now that has become very important, and it has made them commercially viable as well, not just in their adopted hometown of Lincoln, Nebraska, but also perhaps if they're from San Diego. And I think of I'm referencing a specific person there. Her name is Lexi Sun. She is from San Diego, is a star volleyball player at the University of Nebraska. And on July 1, she was able to launch a clothing line. Now, people may reach out to her for their own endorsement deals, but it's also important for that person that on June 30th was unable to launch their own business line because they happen to be an NCAA athlete, is now able to do that. So I think you have that person being valuable in potentially 2 different places. And then the third bucket, and there's one person I always utilize in order to hammer home this point, is a young woman named Chloe Mitchell. There was various articles written about her throughout the year. And Chloe Mitchell was a Michigan high school student during the pandemic that was getting bored just like everybody else, and decided she was going to build a she shed in her backyard for her and her friends to be able to hang out. Her father played football at the University of Michigan. She happened to be a volleyball player that was going to Aquinas College, which is an NAIA school, in September of 2020. She documented the building of this shed and amassed, at last check, 2.5 million TikTok followers as she documented this on TikTok. And the brands that started coming to her for endorsement deals are probably not the ones you would typically think would want to endorse a 17-year-old woman.
Right.
And they were Black & Decker and Menards and Ford trucks. So all of these things were able to connect with her audience and garner millions and millions and millions of impressions. I think it's always important to know that that person that is a potential TikTok star or on IG or Twitter is going to walk onto campuses all over the country with the athletic director probably having no idea that they have this social following, and the people that are following them on social maybe having no idea that they're a volleyball player or soccer or whatever else. We've thrown out a bunch of names here, but Chloe Mitchell, Jason mentioned the Cavender twins. They have 3.7 million TikTok followers. Olivia Dunn, who is a sophomore gymnast at LSU, is considered to be perhaps one of the most valuable student athletes in the country. She has 4.5 million TikTok followers, 1.3 on Instagram, and is an excellent gymnast as well. So you can already go onto her social media followings and see the types of brands that are aligning with her. So I think you have to think of it in 3 different buckets: superior athletes, the homegrown athletes that have a connection in town, and then social media stars.
That's a great way of looking at it. I want to ask one quick question. Jason, I don't know if you had something to follow up with that, but I do want to ask this question because I know it's on folks' minds. I had a property that I oversaw at University of Arkansas that was right across the street from the baseball stadium. And, we wanted to, in a perfect world, be able to go to the baseball coach and say, hey, your players are right here. Why don't, we'll give you a 15% discount for any of your players that choose to live with us. We couldn't do that, before NIL. Now we can approach those baseball players. And I'm kind of wondering, in that situation where we're wanting to go after a specific team because of location to campus or whatever, should we go through something like MarketPryce for those team deals, or is it best to just go to the coach?
Yeah, I think, and because you guys are looking to do like housing, right? That's a specific example.
Yes, but yeah, some type of housing discount.
Yeah, I think the thing you need to watch out for with some of these marketplaces is also how they generate revenue, right? So I think Tiffany was mentioning the fee is a lot higher, right? Well, a lot of marketplaces charge 20 to 30% on top of deals, right? Because that's how they generate revenue. So I think before you even start just doing the research, right? And what's out there for MarketPryce, we charge 5% for brands. It's free to sign up. It's free to use. You can do free product deals if there's no cash that switches hands. Mm-hmm. It's always free to use. But I imagine, like, again, that process of making those connections, I'll save you the dating app example, but like, think about it. You're starting relationships from zero. You may not have those relationships. There are platforms like a MarketPryce where we have thousands of athletes signed up for the exact reason that they want to do endorsement deals like this, whether it's finding housing or partnering with a vegan pancakes company or finding new compression gear. They want to do endorsement deals like this. They're literally signed up to our website for one reason. There's other reasons too, with financial literacy and personal branding, but the biggest reason is finding endorsement deals. So I think why not sign up to, the marketplaces as possible. It's going to save you a ton of time. With that being said, if you have the coach on speed dial, yes, give him or her.
And Darren, let me ask that question too, because I'm not entirely sure, but does the policy allow us to work with coaches? Are they able to navigate those deals or propose those deals to their team?
Oh, I thought originally you were asking whether you could do an NIL deal with a coach. You're asking whether the coach can help facilitate the deal itself. Correct. It's a tricky question. The first thing that I would always recommend, as mentioned before, is address your state-specific NIL law if you have one. So, for instance, in the state of Florida, there's a clause within our NIL law that says a school, an athletic department, any individual associated with the athletic department, including a coach, cannot compensate or cause compensation for the athlete. Now, that's not in every state NIL law, and certainly it obviously doesn't exist in a law that does not exist in a state, because not all states have NIL laws. So the very first thing you do, you address whether there's an NIL law in your state and then what that NIL law states. Secondarily, you'd look at the school NIL policy if there is one. So if there is a prohibition there, it really isn't a concern for the brand, to be quite honest. It's more of a concern for the university, the athletic department, and the coach, him or herself. The best practice is, if you want to reach out to an athlete, don't negotiate the deal through the coach. Ask the coach for the athlete's contact information. There's absolutely no prohibition on the state level, NCAA level, or school level against a school, an individual providing contact information. So that's the best route.
Great. Hey, we are at the top of the hour, and if you guys have some time, I'd like to. We've got a couple of questions that have come up in the chat. I'd like to try to answer them, but if you guys have got something to go on to, completely understand that as well. Greta, do you want to take this question from Ron?
I really, really wanted to. If you guys give us like one more minute, I'll be your best friend.
Okay, I'm sure we can find something.
I mean, that's literally more important than anything else you have to do.
Well, I've got another question that Tiffany asked again that
I was gonna make it a quick two-parter.
Yeah, I got you.
So, Ryan and Tiffany both brought something up, and it's directly related to all of this. So one, Ryan brought up our audiences are hyper local and niche, while many athletes have a reach beyond the locality we typically target. How do you suggest that we find athletes with the right reach that aren't overly expensive because they have a large national reach? So one, I wanted to address that directly, and then also we kind of know the answer, but then have you answer that as well. One, I wanted to tell everybody something to consider for a couple of these is place obviously you want to take your ads and you want to place it on the kind of products that we're talking about right here and that we're going to bring up, and they're going to give more information on that. But two, listing it with what it is that you're actually wanting these athletes to be doing. So do you want them to do on-site and off-site event promotions? Do you want them to be promoting your tabling events? Do you want them to be promoting your specials or being toured, giving video tours of your models and your amenities, these types of things? And then what are you willing to offer them? Is it 50% discount, 20%, 30%, or absolutely free housing for what size floor plan? And if that's what you're willing to offer, then that would be the ad that you would be placing with one of these platforms. And then the athletes are going to be scrolling through these particular platforms and they're going to choose you. So knowing with that knowledge, then they would choose you regardless of how big they are. Is that an accurate response?
I think so.
For MarketPryce, yes. For other platforms, not necessarily. Yes. Okay.
So you may get a huge athlete, you may get a smaller athlete, you may get, more than one that might choose your property. And, ideally that would be really great. And so they're still going to be local. They're still going to be at your school, and you're still going to be able to get a lot of that promotion. The follow-up question from Tiffany was regarding paid partnership, which is something that we're dealing with a lot of influencers. So is it a requirement for any of these that they're going to be required in the event that, say, they do something on Instagram or something or on TikTok, regardless? Are they required then through any of your guys' platforms to state that if they're doing a video, to state that this is a paid advertisement or that it's an ad? Or is that something that they would work out on the back end with their actual legal agreement?
Yeah. Really good question. I could take that one. I want to even take a step back too on if you are offering athletes anything, even if it's product value, even if cash doesn't change hands, there does need to be, quote unquote, like an NIL activity. They need to do something in exchange for it. You can't just give them free stuff because, and I'm pretty sure whether that's the NCAA policy, I don't know, Darren, you could correct me on that, but we make sure that there has to be an NIL activity when given anything. And yeah, like again, with MarketPryce, like we have a team of 11 employees. 7 of them are dedicated to even what you mentioned, Greta, like how do you best craft a campaign, like up front, right? Before you get into it. Like I said, brands can come and have no idea what they're doing. Sign up to MarketPryce. We'll help you craft and ideate and execute a full marketing strategy. Again, included in the free membership, because we want to help our athletes find awesome deals. So we'll help you everything from creating that campaign to through the platform, being able to remind athletes. And that goes to the education piece, right? That athletes can even do something like that. Add a paid partnership, add hashtag ad, hashtag sponsored. So yeah, I mean, in short, absolutely 1000% yes. And I would say every single, I would be very surprised if Open Doors doesn't do that as well as other marketplaces, but yeah.
Great. And then the last one, if we want to take the very last question, is how do you think that this may impact Canadian athletes playing in the state under a student visa? Any implications or predictions of how NIL may affect Canada? Tricky questions.
Yeah, feels like a Darren question.
Would love to hear Darren's thought on international.
It's probably a Darren question.
International law.
So, which I don't practice at all of. But with regard to athletes here on visas, the guidance has been stay away. That the athletes would be jeopardizing their visa status by engaging in this type of activity. So every school's NIL policy that's been published has said they can participate. No state NIL laws say anything to that effect, but until there's guidance that's provided from the federal government to the contrary, international athletes are just staying away from doing this type of activity because it's not worth the risk. And I don't have any idea as to if and when that type of guidance will change. But for now, that is what everyone's being advised.
Marcel, that was a really good question, because as Darren was answering it, I was thinking about all of the a lot of the international residents that I had were student athletes as well, especially tennis team. Seemed to be always a lot from Spain for some reason. But yeah, that's a fantastic question. Thanks, Darren, for that answer.
You want to know something unfortunate too, not to I'm not going to throw anyone under the bus, but we've had so many athletes sign up for MarketPryce and have no idea that it's a stay away. And it's like, man,
Really?
like we need to help in the education of, like, we've told athletes, like, I'm sorry, you can't be here yet. Like, yeah, you can have a free profile, but yet we're not letting them connect with companies. And that's an uncomfortable spot for us to be in. Obviously, we'll do it because we have to. We don't want to get them in trouble. But that's the thing where it's like some athletes that we feel like that should be on the school 1,000%.
Hey, I'm going to take this away from NCAA and talk about esports really quick.
Oh yeah.
My office is a half mile from Winthrop University, which won the national championship at, I don't know, Call of Duty or something. I don't know what it was. It was a big deal.
They competed in our CSMG, ran a national championship in the spring.
Yeah.
Winthrop won in Rocket League. It was their first national championship of any kind. And they're part of the athletic department. It's their first athletic department's national championship.
So, NIL doesn't affect them, but I'm wondering, because those guys have actually been taking sponsorship deals. I mean, you see them around campus wearing stuff that
Sure.
Especially we've got a local company here called Comporium that provides the university with internet, and they of course sponsored the esports team and all that. So you constantly see them wearing stuff that has Comporium on it. So, I'm just wondering if, because I know that market's going to continue to take off, and I think there's a lot of opportunity there as well. Is MarketPryce or any of these platforms working with esports athletes as well?
Absolutely.
Competitors.
Yeah, I for one love, even taking a step back, and you guys mentioned earlier, but like, I do not believe NIL. If anything, NIL increases the size of the pie, right? Like, one of my favorite stats to throw out is digital media spend was $53 billion last year. Influencer marketing, it was like $2.5 billion. So I think over time, we're really bullish on the general creator economy, which I consider esports athletes creators as well as student athletes. Mm-hmm. So those numbers are going to start to even out, especially with like Apple's new privacy update. I'm absolutely extremely bullish on it. I started a company because I'm so excited about it, where I think companies are going to continue to invest. I think esports it has an incredible capacity for advertisers, where these kids are streaming for hours on end. And you could be the chair, you could be the shirt, you could be the background poster, you could be the drink that they're drinking. And it's just an incredible opportunity for brands to get eyeballs. And like, Mike was mentioning earlier, like, it's the eyeballs on it for an elongated time. I mean, there's some advertisers where they spend money on video ads, and it's like, great, did they watch for at least 2 seconds? If so, yeah, then count it. And it's like, well, really? That's where you're spending all of that money, instead of with an esports athlete and having someone being able to talk to your product with engaged individuals and buyers. And that young demographic is something that so many advertisers are going after, 18 to 22. That is like one of the most popular markets to go after in terms of marketing. So it's just such a no-brainer opportunity for a ton of new companies to come in here, a lot of companies to move money towards just esports athletes, and I mean student athletes in general. So very excited about that opportunity.
So Wes, you stepped in it by asking me an esports question, because I'm neck deep in esports at CSMG. Awesome. It's a lot of what we do. We put on live events for collegiate esports, and it is a space which is, everyone would admit, fairly immature. Collegiate esports is. Professional esports has some maturity, but even that's evolving quite a bit. And to Jason's point, it's a market that we're all very bullish on, but to frame it properly for college. It's that NCAA athletic departments have had to keep esports at arm's length for the reason that Jason just mentioned. They've already been getting endorsement deals. They're allowed to compete for prizing money, which obviously up until this year is a no-go as far as the NCAA is concerned. You can't be earning money on the activity, specifically on the activity that you're doing, and then be an eligible NCAA athlete. So many esports programs don't want to be under the athletics umbrella because those athletes are very comfortable making prizing money, traveling around on their own dime or on sponsorship dime in order to compete. So there's some complications there, but I can tell you that based on the popularity of it, everybody's rabbit ears have gone up in the NCAA athletics world, and they're saying, well, maybe we should embrace this. And to be honest, on most college campuses, the group most capable of marketing, scheduling the esports program is the athletics department. The development department can't do it. Facilities isn't going to do it. They have success in marketing specific athletes and scheduling people to show up to events and everything else. So there's a lot to go through. I've talked to hundreds of esports programs this year, but Wes, you brought up Winthrop University. They're a really good example. They have an esports coach. They give out scholarship money. They're under the athletics department, and those athletes can freely get NIL deals. So we've already structured and gone through some NIL deals with some esports competitors. So we're excited about it. I think that space is just getting started. So we're in on the ground floor, and obviously we feel great about the space in the future.
Great. Well, guys, we're at a quarter past the hour, and I see that look from Greta that I think she's got to run to the restroom. I'm not too sure. Either that or the postman's at the door trying to deliver a package. So anyway, guys, thanks so much. We'll talk soon.
Thanks. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Well, again, a big thanks to those guys, Mike, Darren, Jason, for spending their time doing that. That was, they didn't really they weren't doing that because they were going to have a ton of student housing providers running to them. But I really dug deep with those guys because of some mutual connections that we had. And as we talked more and more about it, and they were educating me on it, I said, hey, I think we need to do a webinar. And they were happy to jump in, and I really appreciate that. So any big takeaways that you guys want to talk about, or should we just get into talking about Easy Turn? Because I'm kind of excited about talking about that.
You're asking me that question? No, I thought it was
what about Easy Turn?
Yeah. That's probably where I should go as a founder, I'm assuming. But I thought
for starters, Chase, just for anybody out there that doesn't know what Easy Turn is, can you explain really quick what the platform is about and what you guys are doing?
Yeah, so it basically started off with just trying to digitize the turn board from our experiences in managing turn and running turn.
From more than digitizing. Look, putting it on an Excel sheet is digitizing it.
Well, software and app type situation. We wanted to basically have the transparency of that. I called it a black hole when I was a vendor, and I would get a piece of paper from the property manager to go do these units. And then I get text messages all day. How's this unit going? How's this unit going? Have you finished this one? We need you to go. We need you to go over here. We need you to go over there. So that was the first thing.
For those that don't know the story, Chase didn't just come out of the NFL and say, "Oh, throw some money into a tech company." It wasn't like that at all. Yeah. He actually started a cleaning business, and he's from Lexington, so of course there was a lot of student housing there to be cleaned, and then. You were working with Lincoln. Lincoln was a facilities director at a property. And then ultimately everybody, I think knows about the big deal, the EDR and University of Kentucky ended up striking for their P3, it was like 6,700 beds, and Lincoln was hired by them to oversee that from a facilities director standpoint. And at that point you guys knew, okay, 6,700 beds, we got to do something different.
Right.
And that was really kind of the birthplace of it, right?
Yeah, that's the birthplace of it for sure. And before I even got the chance to even get at UK, my company, we were trying to do, it's called Helping Hands. I don't know if that's good or that's bad to mention that, but essentially we were doing turn, and I was utilizing a lot of my teammates across the country. So essentially I had teammates that lived all over the country, pretty much, that either I was teammates with at one time from playing in NFL, from playing at UVA, especially at UVA, it's all up and down the East Coast. From people that were my
cousins. I mean,
yeah, whatever you want to call them. But essentially, there was two things I knew about Turn when I first started. So my first actual contract in Helping Hands was actually in Dayton, Ohio, so not too far from Lexington. And we did a couple, and the lady called down to Lexington and said, "Hey, you guys got a cleaning company from Lexington, Kentucky that's up here in Dayton." They said they can't get no work in Lexington. So we were doing a good job up there. Then we ultimately got a lot of work in Lexington. And then from there, we tried to expand it. And one thing I knew about Turn right then and there was the fact that it's not a normal job. It's not a normal job for just a traditional cleaning company or a traditional painting company or a traditional carpet cleaning company, just because of the workload and the volume that needed. And more so the best quality needed was somebody that wasn't going to quit. And that was the quality that we provide as athletes and as football players. In my mindset was the fact that we know how to do tough stuff. And that was a tough thing that I was getting into. And I was realizing, like, well, my teammates, I got a lot of teammates and stuff that are struggling to find things to do after sports. And I was like, here's something that you could do. And I was putting them in there. I was putting contracts in their hand to go execute, find people on the ground to do these cleaning deals. So we scaled up pretty fast. My second year, we were probably in 8-10 states, taking on too much than what we can chew. But ultimately, like I said, at the end of the day, I think that the property managers that we work for were more happy that we showed up every day early and we left late, was kind of our motto. And it's kind of how we grew that thing. But the biggest thing I learned was the fact that, like, everybody was doing it the same way. And that wasn't just a Lexington thing. That was a national thing. And in that space, I realized eventually that technology needs to be done well, because I was spending more time trying to invoice at night than I was actually doing the actual work during the day, and figuring out what do we do, what do we complete, all those different type of things like that. So ultimately met with Lincoln, and he said he was trying to come up with a way to turn the UK with more efficiency, and we decided let's take this thing on and let's try to draw it out, because the benefits were endless as far as, like, if everybody, I can be better at my job, he can be better at his job, and everybody at the end of the day wants to get that done and win on that level. So that's how things started for us at Easy Turn, and things are going well so far. I never thought the journey would be this far. We know when we first created it, we thought that, me and Link were like, all right, we'll build it and it'll just be something that just you build it and leave it type situation, lives in the app store, you make money off of it, et cetera, et cetera. No, it's nowhere close to that. We're starting a tech company. So we got a full development team. We have inspections in our platform now. It's turned into a thing of its own. People are using it for preventative maintenance, warranty tracking. There's a whole bunch of different things being used for our software in general, but we still think that we're the best in turn management space, and that's where we started at. But essentially, the funny thing is that me and Lincoln said, all right, let's do this, create it, make it, and let's let it go. And it's been full time for ever since. So it's exciting. And I appreciate everybody in the student housing space for accepting us and accepting our ideas and concept, and at least giving a chance to be a space where we can grow in. And it's been a space where we could grow in, and hopefully, we can continue to grow and also spread our wings into other industries in real estate.
Yeah. It's been awesome to see you guys grow over the past, 3-4 years that I've been involved with you guys. And then seeing the product evolve as well. It went from strictly, a digitized turn board, as you said, that was kind of bringing, our mobile devices and everything else together to utilize those to be much more streamlined and efficient. Now it's an inspection app, and there's so many other things that you guys are doing with it. And I'm hearing great things from not just both off campus, but the on campus folks as well. You guys have done a fantastic job of getting that out to them as well. And I think that's been one thing I've heard from a lot of on-campus executive directors, that they were really missing out on that innovation, which is so weird because you're in a college atmosphere. Like, it looks like you could just take that over to the to the computer science department and say, hey, fix this for me, come up with something better. And but that just wasn't happening. And so it's been really cool to see the universities tag onto what you guys are doing. So, well, fantastic. Well, hey, other than that, I do want to give you one more minute here to plug something you guys are doing that I think is fantastic. Lincoln has he's grown his podcast wings a little bit, and he's now started his own podcast with you guys. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so we have a podcast called the Prop Ops Podcast, and essentially, we just wanted to. First of all, anybody knows Lincoln knows he loves to talk. And I just wanted to let him have a chance. I think it was a good marketing opportunity and also a way for us to get our story out there a little bit better. We're mostly heads down on sales and product and things of that nature, but I think there's a lot to know with like getting to know us as individuals, and then also getting to know some of our clients. So we do have a lot of like customers come on and show their experience and things of that nature from on campus, off campus, and then also we just talk shop, so inspections. We talk what's the best things with cleaning, what's the best things with painting, what are the turn analytics looking like from this year. So from talking shop to actual customer experiences with Easy Turn and highlighting some different players in the student housing space and how they got to where they are and why they think this is valuable or not valuable and what they see coming up. We just think it's fun. It's fun. One thing about a startup is that you're not rolling in the dough, right? You're not rolling in the dough. So you got to have fun while you can, right? And one thing I try to do as a leader of my team is to make sure that they're enjoying what they're doing.
Well, that's fantastic. And from everything from what I've been around your team, beyond you and Lincoln, it looks like you guys are having a lot of fun. And I've caught the first couple of episodes and looking forward to more, and would certainly, especially if you're on the facility side, I think this is a fantastic way of, kind of broadening, what you're doing on the facility side, just because Lincoln, that's why he co-hosts for us. If there's something facilities related we're talking about, I want him on here because he gets it and is able to offer so much insight. Greta, any parting words?
No, that was fantastic. Chase, you were amazing. That's it.
Chase, again, thanks so much for joining us. And if folks want to hear more about Easy Turn, it's easyturn.net, right?
Correct. Yes.
And how can they connect with you on social media?
LinkedIn is probably the best, Chase Minnifield, but my name is my handle for all my social media. So if you feel free to want to see what I'm posting about on Instagram or something, if you care that much, that's cool. But most of LinkedIn, I would probably say. And for the Prop Ops, just search the Prop Ops Podcast on all your podcast streaming platforms or on YouTube. So
awesome. Well, thanks, guys, and we'll talk soon.
Bye.